Good evening, everyone. We welcome all of you to this, what I am expecting to be a very lively conversation. But before we kick it off, just a couple of housekeeping rules. Number one, please keep your mute on. I don't see anybody bringing in their AI companion. If you do, we will mercilessly kick them out. But we will be posting recordings on YouTube. Number three, if you have to ask a question, post it on the chat, but we may also ask you to unmute yourself and speak. All set? Should we get started? And I have the recording on, just so all of you know. So once again, a very, very warm welcome to all of you. I'm extremely delighted to have this conversation with my erstwhile colleague, Sharad Mehta. Now, Sharad has had a very interesting career. Of course, I knew him when he was part of my strategy team leading our M&A efforts. So I know him in the corporate avatar. But since the corporate avatar, he's become a science educator and now an author. And I'm really curious to know what next. With that, Sharad, why don't we get started with your journey so far, so that everybody gets to sort of get a glimpse of who you are before we talk about your book.
Sure, Sushma. Thanks for actually, being a part of this. Honestly, if I have to say, I can weave a tale around all that things that happened to say how, amazing I have been. But it all just happened. It's all in the hindsight. I can connect dots, but in the foresight, I was clueless where I was going. All along from the time I was studying, I had been, science probably has been my first love and last love. I hope my wife is not listening to this, but uh, it has always been. And being from middle class, things took turn, and then you became engineer, and then you became MBA, and then you went into corporate and all that. It all happened. But a large part of my journey actually was designed by only quitting jobs because I was refusing to get relocated on site. I was like, I quit all my jobs because I was asked to leave India and go out. And this is nothing to do with, by the way, of patriotism or something. This is just very stupid personal reasons. So I think all the shifts that happened were more just trying to hold on to one thing that I wanted to hold on to. And in the process, I had to keep moving around, which led to a lot of this. So corporate changes primarily were driven by just not wanting to be out of India for a long-term period. That's all happened, and that led. What happened in my education was definitely nowhere in the plan, nowhere in my thought process. And what I'm doing today didn't even exist in my dream. I mean, I didn't know anything about the way I teach today, that something like this exists. So it just happened, it's almost like, that's exactly how it happened. On the whim of a moment, I walked into my boss cabin to put in my resignation to say, I want to find out an answer to a question that has been bugging me. And he was good enough to say, since you don't know what answer, you don't know how to go or where to go, why don't you give in one more year? And then after that, if you're still wanting to do it, I will not stop you. And I think it was good. I got 1 year, but I didn't get any answer to where I started. But I definitely got a good clarity on the fact is that whether I have an answer or don't have an answer, I have to start. And that's how I ended up quitting in 2016, not knowing much, having a very vague idea that I wanted to be in education. I was upset with the fact that I cannot get one person to discuss something science because that really, fascinates me. I mean, I see it as the most beautiful story ever written. And I used to be very upset to see my own daughter. I mean, I was like, she was growing up in schools and saying, this is not the way you learn. And, for a lot of I have also accepted this is the way the system is sort of. So one thing led to another, and I started, and within starting 3 months, I actually gave up, and I was actually again searching for job because I could not find a headway. I just had a puzzle. I had no starting point and I didn't know where to go. And I thought maybe I'm wasting my time. This looks to be a complicated problem. And when I gave up, surrendered, like they say, when you give up and say you're not smart enough, something happens which is beautiful. That's how five children walked into my life in a setup that I could have never created myself. It just happened. And I was trying to act like a smart teacher, trying to teach them. But in the process, I didn't read an experiment got done. And I learned something beautiful about science that I could have never discovered by reading books. So, to sum up, it was a very, I don't know, I have a better word than serendipity. It just happened. Maybe I was destined. Maybe I was destined to be tortured. So that's all it happened, I would
No,
say.
I think serendipity, um, life and chances occur in everybody's lives, but it's a question of capitalizing on them. And I think you have capitalized it very well. Can you talk a little bit about the Faraday course and Dream Noble before we talk about walking in the footsteps of a child?
See, Dream Noble, actually, if you look at this, the word is not Noble, but it's Nobel. Because, like all of us have, when we were child, we had lots of dreams. I also, at some point wanted to become a cricketer and then a pilot, and, at some point wanted to become a some CEO and run my own company, and all kinds of dreams. Basically, as a child, it was like every season had a different dream, whatever fascinates you at that point in time. And so that's how life continued. Dreams came, you tried with them for some time, then you moved to something else and kept in. But it took some time for me. I don't know whether the time became, it just got too late, but it took some time for me to realize there is one dream that never left me. It always, patiently remained on the sidelines for me. And that was my childhood fascination of winning a Nobel Prize someday. I was
Wow.
fascinated by these people. I used to, I just don't know. I mean, I still desire someday I can hold that prize in my hand. But something I know, probably I realized it too late that this was my most cherished dream. And so Dream Novel is basically more like an accepting that maybe now I'm not good enough to win a Nobel Prize, but one of these children that I'm engaging with, I know for sure they can get it. Which one of them can I ignite the fire enough that someday before I leave this planet, I have at least one of them holding the Nobel in their hand, and which will make me feel that I held it in my hand. So that's how Dream Novel is, that word that signifies my dream only, and I'm piggybacking on children. Faraday is a science course that I do. It's entirely a course, like I said, is I had no clue that a science can be looked at this perspective. It's these five children and then many after them who taught me how we should learn science and read science and understand science. So it's a course that, in fact, this book is actually the first 10% of the course. The first module is this book where I engage with children to share with them what they're already good at. And then the course follows. And so it's a course which does, it's a single story of mankind, how in the last 2,500 years, human thought created this most fantastical story called science. So, every theory, every physics, chemistry, biology, geology, astronomy across comes in an integrated manner in a discussion-oriented fashion, built around the way children think and the way problems they solve. So that's nutshell what this course is, and my dream is all about. Slightly bigger than what probably I can achieve, but nonetheless, it's the dream that
No,
I live for.
but it all starts with a dream. And I'll tell you this. I have come across many people who have achieved a lot of things. But today, it's for the first time I'm talking to somebody who wants to win the Nobel Prize. Now, whether it's the Nobel Prize for peace or for literature or for science, I'm not, all bets are off, or maybe all three. So I'm actually very thrilled. I've known you for a while, Sharad, but this is one facet I have not known. So kudos to that. And I think, it all starts with dreaming and dreaming big. And you have always done that. As I was reading the book, and I must tell everybody, I have read it cover to cover, and not just read the book, because this book is rich with so many anecdotes. And I cannot tell you, within the first 10 pages, I must have gone to the web at least 30 times to look at some of the inner stories that were woven in it. So don't think of this as just a book. This is an extremely thought provoking book because it sort of weaves in a lot of things we've all grown up listening to. It has tales, it has, um, historical facts, it has a generous dosing of very interesting quotes. Personally, for me, the quotes and the references to some of the epics and the things like Jataka tales and Mahabharata made it relive my childhood. Okay, with that in mind, Sharad, tell us how you have evolved as a writer. What was in your head when you were writing this book? When did you conceive it? Did you write a lot of things and toss them out? So give us a little bit about your journey of writing this book.
Uh, First, I must say, Sushma, I've been very kind with words. So I would say that you know me well enough to know that, I'm not a writer. I mean, my language is grammatically, I find it horrible. I would have loved to be, able to speak with the diction, and that I love people who can speak language grammatically correct and with the right diction. And I think this is something that can happen only in the childhood. So probably born in Rajasthan and grown up in UP didn't give me that flexibility. But I don't think I ever dreamt of being a writer. I don't think it is in me to write a tale that can, capture people's attention. In fact, as an individual, I cannot read a fiction book. If you give me a fiction book, I just cannot. I need a non-fiction science book to read only. That's all I can do. So, weaving a tale is not my capabilities. I don't think I ever thought of being a writer ever. This is a book which never started thinking. It took 9 years for me to compile this 260 odd pages. So it was never at any point I was writing with the purpose of writing a book. There were multiple events that happened, and they all sort of came together. So at some point I was doing a class, and I was struggling with a child because I used to be very intrigued by the fact that when I'm asking a science question, the child gives me such logical, thoughtful responses. And when we are having a casual chat, suddenly the discussion becomes so illogical. And I could not understand how can you switch on being logical to illogical within a matter of few minutes. I mean, how can you do that? And I used to be very intrigued by that. And I used to keep wondering, puzzling. I have a huge habit of taking notes. So I used to take notes after my classes and all that. So, one of the conversations, one of the mothers just, very, again, like serendipity, she just mentioned, why don't you use stories? And, I thought about it and I said, well, what's the harm? Let's use stories. So I started using stories because I love mythological stories. I read a lot of them. I love them a lot. And I find them, so layered that you can keep, pulling them in different directions that you feel like. So, I said, okay, not no harm. Let's start using stories. And these were the first 5 children where I was lucky to get parents like that who had no focus on marks or grades. They just wanted the child has some specific interest to be held on to. And these 5 children were like as diverse as you can think, aged 7 to 12 years. So, the 7-year child was a walking encyclopedia on dinosaurs. I have yet not seen a child like him. I mean, he knew so much about dinosaurs that today I know so many names of dinosaurs only thanks to him. And then the other end, I had a child who had absolutely no interest in science. He made it very clear to me, I want to make money. So teach me how to make money. That's it. Don't try to teach me science and all that. I said, okay, as long as your parents are not walking into the room, what's the harm? Karke. So that's how I got these 5 children as diverse as can be. And all these parents had one requirement that my child has some interest, hold on to it. That's all. I am not looking for curriculum and marks and grades. I said, why not? I mean, if I'm getting paid for it, no harm in, I will do it. And anyway, I was looking for a job at that point in time. I said it. So I made it very clear, as long as I don't get a job, I will do it. So, that's how I started. And, that's how the tale started getting one on. And, slowly and slowly, these children will leave pieces of puzzle. And I suddenly started realizing that, what have I done in the 40 years of my life? I think I knew so much of science and I cannot even handle the simplest of the questions. I mean, to give you an example, one of these child once I went to a class asked me a simple question: how does a fan work? It's a question you don't need a science degree to answer. I mean, anyone can answer this question, you know. And the most interesting part was when I was like, thankfully I was slightly groomed by then. So I asked him, do you don't know the answer or you want me to re-explain the answer? Because I have now seriously started realizing that there's something more to a child's thinking. He said, no, I know the answer. And he gave me the answer the way each one of us knows. And now I was wondering, what is that he looking forward to? If he knows the answer, then why is he asking me that question? So, I did what many times all of us do is which we fool around with people is you give the same answer in a roundabout way. And that's what I did to try to sort of fool around with the child, thinking, okay, he's just trying to probably do time pass with me or whatever. He's a distracted child or whatever, which is how we, typecast children many times. But you won't believe it took me 6 sessions. I used to do only one session a week, so it's 1.5 months. Each session of 2 hours, 12 hours to answer this simple question: how does a fan work? And in answering that question, I had to actually go through physics, chemistry, biology, geology. I had to touch almost every piece of subjects. And I was like, what is happening? This child is literally taking me for a ride. I don't know what to do about it. I mean, he'll just keep asking questions and I have to answer it because that's the arrangement I have with their parents. So I used to be very intrigued. I used to feel sometimes, for lack of better word, pissed off. I used to, sometimes I'm sure I would have behaved badly with the child also saying, is okay, enough of these questions. Let's move to the right topic kind of things and all that I would have done. So all that happened and got over. And then I had also forgotten about it. And, like I said, I take, lots of notes. I always take notes. It's my habit to write down things, So I used to take notes for these classes. They were written and forgotten. And then one day, while searching for some of these questions the children ask, I stumbled upon a German scientist by name Julius Meyer. And who is actually, I mean, his name, most of the people who do science also don't even talk about it, but he's the one who first gave to the world the law of conservation of energy, which is what the basic principle on which fan works. It was a brilliant thing. This guy at the age of 9 years, at the age of around 9 or 10 years old, had a puzzle that he was solving, very similar to the age at which this child has asked me this question: how does a fan work? His problem was different. He tried finding an answer to the problem. He tried lots of things. He could not find an answer. He forgot about it, moved on in life, grew up to become a doctor, went from Germany once during those imperialism days of when these ships were traveling across the globe, went on a ship from the Europe to all the way to what is called as Dutch East Indies or now Indonesia. And he was intrigued by the fact is that the blood in Indonesia of people who live in Indonesia is much, redder in color compared compared to the blood what he saw in his colder countries like Germany. And this was exactly opposite of what he was taught. So he started wondering what is there. So he had a biological problem. His earlier problem was actually a physics problem at the age of 10 that he encountered. He forgot about that. Now he has a biological problem he was trying to sort, to which no one had an answer. And then he suddenly remembered something he has read in his chemistry class, which actually gave him a clue, and which over a period of time he actually wrote the paper while he was on his honeymoon with his wife. So that's the fascination science carries. Physics, chemistry, biology all came together to give the word to law of conservation of energy. And today it's only taught in physics class at best, sometimes maybe chemistry. The interesting thing here is when I went back to my notes, I realized that child has effortlessly done the same journey that Julius Meyer had done with me. And while I was stupid enough to call him a distracted child. So here I had a potential Nobel laureate. Obviously, there were no Nobel Prizes in that world at that point in time, talking to me and explaining to me why I'm stupid and I could not get it correct. So, these are the stories that got woven over a period of time and over a year, over the 9 years, which, thanks to these children leaving these thoughts behind and thanks to my habit of taking notes, it just came together and brought me to a point of life in life where I was frustrated enough to do something to survive. And, that frustration led to this book getting written, basically. So, that's the long and short of this story, Sushma. It's children dictating and I taking notes, and at some day the picture just happened in the hindsight.
Understand. So, Sharad, as I was reading the book, I know that you had aimed this at children, but I felt that there are so many things that even adults can learn, management professionals can learn. So, it was very insightful in terms of building your thinking process. And Anjum, you asked a question on the chat. Is this about the book? Yes, it is about the book, Walking in the Footsteps of a Child, but it is also about the process of becoming a writer, and it's about the thought process. And there are multiple ways in which you can slice this. You can look at, how education can be improved. How can you spur learning? Today, learning is painted with one brush, yet there is so much more to unpack in the way we learn. So that is the answer to your question, Anjum. And we can make this very interactive. So please post your questions on the chat. Now, Sharad, you talked about fables, tales. I can tell you, growing up, Mahabharata was my favorite book. It still is a favorite book because every time you read it, right, the lens with which you can look at some of the tales, it's applicable in business, it's applicable in day-to-day living. It also is applicable in the way you live life. So I was absolutely fascinated, and it prompted me to go back and read a lot of the tales. And I will come back to some of them later. But one thing that has been very intriguing for me right from the time you sent me the cover page of this book, what is this cover? But my initial thought was, is it the Rorschach's ink blot test? Okay, but tell us what this image on your book is.
No, I've asked this question to many people. One of my friend got frustrated. If I know the answer, I will tell you now. Why are you not telling me the answer? So I asked this, what do you think this cover image? And uh, most of the time, the answers that I've got is like you said, Rorschach's test. Someone said, it's probably someone was trying to paint a butterfly, or someone saw a face in it. That is what Rorschach's test is also all about. You see, what do you see tells you something about your psychology or personality. You know, uh, uh, for starters, this is not painted by any adult, so it's done by a child. It's done by a child who's my daughter, and he was probably less than 5 years old. So this is not a painting, right? This is not a painting. What she did was something that I think all of us have done as a child. Where what she did was she took a paper, folded it, drew a crease in between, put color there, and just pressed it, and that's how this butterfly came out. Now, the reason I use this picture here is because one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in this last 9 years is the power of simple intuitive thinking, which is what a child is born with. So, this image represents that the moment we as an adult look at it, we see it as a modern art or some brilliant painting by some painter, or, depending on if I put a big name, then it becomes a great around it. Whereas what is this? Is just a very simple, a child in a very simple way painting what looks to be a very nice painting. So to me, this captures the essence of the book, that it's all about being simple. Some of the most complicated things can be solved by simple intuitive thinking, which is what this book talks about. And that's what the message of that painting is around that. The children, one is that simple thinking is quite a bit neglected in the world. And because it is neglected, we as adults don't give children enough respect. Typically in conventional education system, it's based on 3 R's, which is reading, arithmetic, and writing. There is an alternative system called Waldorf, where I've read about some of these alternative systems, and I like something about Waldorf because their 3 R's are reverence, repetition, and rhythm. So reverence is the first R, which says you should revere the child. You don't know how amount of wisdom he carries inside him. And that's where, the second point for me, this image is, one is reminding us that simple thinking has power, being vulnerable has power, and then respecting a child more than just saying in a very simple way that he is a creative child. No, they are born geniuses. Can you allow them to remain genius is the question for me, always as a teacher.
Hmm. You know, what I loved about it is that it made you think. It made you think as to what is this? And unlocking that power to think in every human being is the power of true education. Which actually takes me to a quote. Now, for those of you on this call, I'm actually sitting in a suburb of Philadelphia, okay? And, there's a quote in your book right in the beginning. It's about common sense without education is better than education without common sense, okay? And this is written by Ben Franklin. And that's exactly what you have done through this book is how do you provoke common sense in everyone? Sharad, with this, you talked about the 3 R's. Okay, you talked about the 3 R's. We know it as reading, writing, and arithmetic. And you said it is reverence, repetition, and rhythm. Can you talk about your 3 rules of rational thinking? Because the foundation of your entire basis for this book and education seems to revolve around the 3 rules of rational thinking.
Absolutely. I mean, like, that's what I think is all about. See, the way it works most of the time for we adults is that we have a philosophy, but philosophy is very adjective. So it's very difficult to, get your hands and legs around it completely to every individual's philosophy. But to make it more palatable, more easy to absorb, we typically convert the philosophy into a process. But I think what happens when you do this conversion sometimes is that the essence is lost because no process can ever represent the philosophy completely at the end of the day. So what happens is these 3 are my philosophy in the way I look at education. This is the intrinsic DNA of a child. And these 3 rules are like it's in one is that you wonder always, you always ask questions, and you always look for multiple credible evidences. Now, if you look at any child, you will see, this is not something that you teach them. They are born with it. There is enough research on this, and you don't need any research on this. I mean, whoever has seen a child in action in a environment where no one is telling them what to do, see how do they solve problems and how do they handle it. Because children learn by doing role playing, and role playing is nothing but imagining a problem and solving it in the way they think the world will accept it. So that's their way of fitting into the world. So if you can look at any problem through these eyes, I think the philosophy becomes ingrained in you. Then the process is just an outcome of it. Even if you have to manipulate or modulate the process later on, it does not bother you too much. You don't get stuck to it. So I see this as an essence of a child. From a parent perspective, I see this as the 3 things that a parent should hold on to. I mean, one of the things that I've literally, those who know me, that I probably bored them to death, telling them that if your child asks you a question, you should never answer it. Because a question is not an opportunity for me to answer and probably show my intelligence or make my child an intelligent. Because we are not here to make encyclopedic children. We are here to make thinking children. Right? So children are born with a certain kind of capability. Don't answer them, but use these 3 steps, these 3 ingredients, and convert that question into a boundaryless conversation. So when your child asks you a question, you start and stop to first wonder on that question, how much beauty it can hide. And you may not be able to see it. Like I said about the fan question, I didn't see any big thing in that question when I did. I didn't think there was any wonderful when I started on it. I was just lucky to be pushed into starting into it in a different direction. That's all. But when child asks you a question as a parent, take a step back and wonder what mystery can be hidden in it, because there is something more magical which you will see. Like many times I tell parents, when your child comes and asks you a question, especially if they are small children, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old children, when they ask you a question, you take breath, take 5, 10 breaths and don't answer. You may realize sometimes the child will actually just go away, will not even wait for response. Because for us, for adults,
Folks, can you
a
please mute
question,
yourself, everyone other than the speaker? Yeah. Sorry, Sharad.
yeah. So Bhaskar, you may have to mute yourself. Okay.
I've muted him.
So, so I was saying is when a child asks a question, actually we as adults see a question mark at the end of it. For a lot of children, it's just an exclamation marks. So when you say, why is the sun orange? You think it's a science question. For a number of times, it's just an explanation. It's just an, not explanation, just a wonder. It's, just trying to be, absorbing that wonder of nature, that how can it be orange in the, mornings and evenings and but yellow in the afternoon kind of thing. So don't answer it. You have just killed the wonder if you answer it. Wait for some time. They do really look for an answer. And if they look for an answer, then go back to rule number 2 and start asking more questions. Understand where is the question coming from? What is he trying to assess? Because sometimes just because they ask you a question, why is the sun orange, does not mean they're actually looking for that answer. There is something else that has triggered them.
So,
So a
Sharad, there is a
child,
question. There's a question or a comment from Nisha, which I think is very important to address. It says not to answer a question is very unlike the conventional schooling, where information is bombarded. How do you reconcile with this aspect for those who go into regular schools? And I can very clearly imagine this to be everybody's problem. Let me say one thing and I'll have Sharad elaborate. So when Sharad says don't answer the question, he doesn't mean don't answer the question at all. He just says don't immediately jump to answer the question. Am I right, Sharad?
yes. I mean, see, two parts to it. One is don't immediately answer the question, because when you stop, you give yourself a chance to absorb the, the seriousness or maybe the beauty of the question far more. You know, so stopping and not answering is not about not answering. It's about getting a complete hang of the question before. Too fast answering may kill the wonder, which is not what I think as a parent you are desiring of. Second is when we say we want to answer the question, we have this very one question, one answer model system, education system that we work with. Why does the ball go up and come down? Because there is gravity. There is no second thought around it. That's what happens, right? That reminds me of a very interesting anecdote. There was this scientist by name, suddenly I'm forgetting his name. So he was actually, I'll get it, but he was actually writing in his notebook some of the what in physics are called as what are called as universal constants, basically some numbers which are very important for science, right? So he was writing those numbers in his book, and his friend actually came and asked him, why are you writing these numbers? And he said that I'm writing this for God. The friend started laughing. I mean, you think God does not know this? He created all these things. So why do you have to tell God about all this? And this guy made a very interesting comment. I mean, it's like literally the soul of science there. He said that, no, this is our version of reality. I don't know what's God's version of reality. What you're not realizing is gravity is our version of reality. That's how we see the world as. It makes a lot of sense to us for reasons, but that does not mean that's reality. Now, you just go back 300 years back, for almost 2000 years, mankind had a brilliant answer. They kept Earth at the center of the universe and made everything move around it. And by just doing that small thing, they actually can answer the question, why does a ball thrown up comes down without needing any gravity? The point is there are lots of alternate answers. You pick one of them because that's where the third rule comes in, multiple credible evidences. So you take that gravity today gets supported by lots of credible evidences, but you go 300 years back and that model had lots of credible evidences. But the important thing to realize is a theory is not a fact of nature. A theory is a story, literally. It's an approximation that a scientist makes, and that's not I am saying it. This is what Richard Feynman, a Nobel laureate, said. One of those of you who want your children to, in the future years, want to prepare for them, see fancy entrance exams like IITs and all those, I would suggest read his books. It's freely available on the internet. You don't need all the books that are propagated all the time around. He was an amazing scientist, I mean, and you should read his book called You Must Be Surely Joking, Mr. Feynman. It's a brilliant exposition of how, a simple childlike mind works. So yes, I'm not saying don't answer. I'm saying is walk a journey and let the answer unfold. Then come with preconceived answers and willing to give that only as the answer. Right? I can give many more examples, but that's where the essence is. Don't give answer. If you don't give, sometimes it's a test of patience. I can completely understand. For a parent, it's like very difficult. Your child is asking question and I'm not answering it. Am I leaving him to, other children will know the answer? I understand that. I have two children. You go through it. But like they always say, is education is never about the child. It's always about the parent. It's for us to change our working styles. It's not about teaching children. They are born in the most pristine way of thinking. So parenting is not about making a child smart. Parenting is about me becoming a good enough gardener to let the flower bloom, because the flower already has everything inside it to become good. You just need to ensure that you don't interfere too much. That's so that's where, I would wrap up with saying is, yes, it's difficult, but I think it's worth taking the risk and doing it. For me, it has given brilliant results. I wish the same for you.
So, um, Sharad, I know you wrote this book keeping in mind children and education. And everyone who is here, the 30 odd people who are on this call today, we're all professionals. And I have to tell you this, everything that you have written is applicable as a manager and a leader. Please pause to think about, how do we react when somebody in your team comes up with a question or a comment? Often than not, at the surface level, it might be a very dumb question. And we, as judgmental people, tend to dismiss some of these things as, why is this guy or why is this woman asking me such a dumb question? And the biggest learning that I have got through life, which got reinforced in the book, Walking in the Footsteps of a Child, is never jump to be judgmental. Think for a second why somebody might be asking you this question. Is it because you have not been clear? Is it because there are alternatives that have not been explored? Is it because the question itself is fundamentally flawed? And I think this is at the core of education. It's not at the core of education, it's also at the core of every conversation, every interaction. So I seriously think, Sharad, this book should not just be looked at from a lens of educating children, but I think there is a lot to be gleaned even for professionals and by people who can put this into action in a work life or even at a home life. Do you agree with me or do you disagree with me?
No, I mean, if I have my way, I would want to share this with, the way I have seen now in the last 9 years. I would want to share it with only adults. In fact, when I say I do a science course with children, if I have my way, I will do it only with adults, right? In fact, one of my batches, I remember I made it mandatory for mothers and say, if you don't sit through that, I will not do with your child. So, the point is, we are for me, science is just a tool. You're using that tool to actually let the child hone this pristine skills of thinking that he's or she is born with. So it's actually completely, for me, the right audience is actually adults. But the challenge here is, and obviously does not make sense. I mean, children gave me this. What am I? I am not going to teach them again what they have taught me, kind of things. But the challenge, like I said, is uh, I mean, again, I may be biased because of my experience of the last 9 years, is that whenever I talk about simple stories and simple way of thinking, invariably I've got feedback is, this is too simple. Can you have a Harvard case study instead of a Jatak story? And I've always said, that's the essence I'm trying to bring around. I'm trying to say the same thing is, look at simple. I mean, let me give you one of my most fascinating story, which is not a part of this book actually, because, this book is consciously does not have examples of science. Uh, That's my final dream, at least. At least now the Nobel Prize I know is quite far off, but this is just the 10% of what I teach to children. And, eventually before leaving the planet, I want to type out that entire science book that I want to, write. So this is just 9 years and 260 pages. I don't know how much life I've left before I finish that book. But most fascinating story of science that I know of today is a story that each one of us know. Each one of us know the hare and the tortoise story, that race that happened and the tortoise left, and this, ends with the moral slow and steady wins the race kind of thing. You know, uh, you'll be surprised if you actually slightly think and ponder on the story in the right direction. 2,500 years back, that story sowed the seeds of the most iconic scientific theories of all time called the atomic theory. That's the power of simplicity. A simple story can teach me to a theory that explains today everything that we explain in the world in the realm of science is through atoms. That the world is made up of atoms. So everything is about interaction between atoms at the end of the day. And that simple story without, I mean, I have asked this thing to many times to adults, and I would have given the same answer. How does the world know that there are atoms? Because no one sees it. And the answer is very simple always, that there are those big fancy gadgets, microscopes, and those who know more will talk about electron microscopes and all those which show you atoms. You go and search online. I mean, only in the last few years, now we have some kind of a very vague picture of an atom. Humans have never seen atoms even till today. Forget about electrons, protons, and neutrons. We have never seen. These are our figments of our imagination. This is a story that I'm telling you, the most fantastical story the world has created. So if such a small story can create such a big theory of science without needing any fancy gadget, have we really understood the power of the simple story that children read? So, that's where, Sushma, very honestly, because I don't carry big fancy, designations behind me. I don't think people are willing to listen to me. So this is very, idealist, too much of a, person living in the clouds, or, just kind of a fundamentalist, whatever it is. I've heard all these kinds of descriptions about me. And that's where I very consciously said, okay, this is not for children. I said, this is not for adults, it is for children, because I know they gave it to me and they will appreciate it. And if adults want to look at it from the lens of parents, that's where, very consciously one of my friends told me, and then I added a chapter actually. So the last chapter called Afterword, a note for the parents, was added only in the last few days when one of my friends said, if you think it is for parents, write something for them. I said, okay, let me add, and that's how it happened. Otherwise, I feel it is for adults because
Got
this
it.
has made my life whatever it is in the last 9 years. I
No,
don't know how to put it
fantastic.
for adults. That's as simple as that.
Fantastic. So, everyone, 266 pages, but it's written in a very simplistic style. So, it's an easy read, but it'll make you think. So, there are two ways in which you can read the book. You can just read the book and put it aside, or you can take every page, every word, and ruminate about it. So, Sharad, with your indulgence, in your book, you talk about an experiment which was conducted in Stanford. I want to involve everybody who's on this call here for the next 2 minutes. So, the experiment is like this. This was what was done in Stanford. In a class, they had divided the class into groups and said, we give you $5. Okay. You have 5 days to think about it. But once you've thought about it, you have to put it in action within 2 hours. And after that 2 hours, you will have 3 minutes to come and present how you went about investing that $5. The problem statement was, what can you do with $5? How can you multiply it? Okay. So, in the next 2 minutes, I want all of you to think about, if somebody just gave you $5 and asked you to multiply it, okay, the fastest way to multiply it, what would you do? Your clock starts now, okay, in 2 minutes. If anyone has an answer, put up your signal hand raise button.
And I'll just add two things here. whatever comes to your mind, share. Don't think it has to be a great answer. And second, let's keep one answer out, which is folding the note and doubling it. So beyond that, you're
It
free to
has to
say
have
what you want.
monetary value.
Be a child for the next 2 minutes and think like them. Let's see what best we can do.
Okay, we have one answer from Annette. Annette, can you show yourself? And okay, Annette, basically, I won't give the answers. So we have 1 more minute left, but we have one answer at least. We have two answers. Kirti's 10-year-old son has an answer. Fantastic.
Already double $5. How we can grow $5 monetarily in a simple way.
Okay, so we have three answers. Dharmesh, please mute yourself. All right, we have three answers. Shall I? Okay, there are four answers now. So Annette and Kajal, five answers. So Annette and Kajal, Annette wants to set up a lemonade stall, and Kajal wants to start a cookie stall. Okay. Jaydev has find more people with $5 and pull them together. And Meghna will play chargeable card magic tricks. And Deepika will spend it all on herself. And her thinking is the happiness that she will get by spending it on herself is not measurable. Sharad, look at these answers and give your filter. And Jyoti Astankar says, my 12-year-old son says, we'll buy boomers and sell them in the school in a slightly higher price as there is demand there. So he's a consummate businessman. Okay. And Kirti's 10-year-old son, what did Kirti, what did your son have to say? He will buy a toy for $5 and sell it for $6. Then he'll buy it for $6 and sell it for $7 and keep going. Okay. All right. Interesting exercise. Sharad, why don't you give the winning answer? At least in the Stanford example.
Yeah, I mean, in this, I would not want to choose because, there is nothing like a right or wrong answer here. It's all about being able to how much creativity can we push through. So the team that actually got the highest was in the 2 hours they made, I think, if I remember correct, $650 or something out of $5. And what they did was something very interesting is, see, if you look at this puzzle, when I say you have 2 hours and $5, your mind knows now these are the boundaries I have, which is what one of the things that I discuss in the book is the filter of constraints that your mind works with all the time. Over a period of time, as we grow, the constraints start, some way, putting boundaries around our ability to think, right? That team did this very simple thing. They said, I don't care about $5. I don't care about these 2 hours because they are meaningless. Even if the teacher has given this constraint, I don't even want to wonder about them. I don't even want to think about them. I believe that there is no constraint on me. That's how they went. And what they did was, Stanford graduates are prize graduates in the world. So what they did was they went to companies in the local area and they said, I have a 3-minute slot where you can talk to these graduates and position your company for hiring them, because otherwise you have to go and stand in the queue in the, in the hiring season. So they sold that 3-minute slot to a company for $650, where the company can go and make a pitch to these students to hire them. You see, the 2 hours is out of the window, $5 out window. I don't care. They didn't even open the envelope. That's the important thing. Children many times, you see, they don't have constraints in their mind. That's the reason they can play with fire, and it's dangerous. I'm not saying a child should play with fire, but you should remember that is where somewhere creativity is also a function of constraints. As we grow up, our knowledge, and that's why I say in the book also, your existing knowledge is your biggest constraint. Again, the same which I was giving example before, gravity. You only think in terms of gravity, and there is nothing else you are allowing your child to say or giving it to him. That constraint allows that thinking to not magnify. In just the way, because we were stuck to that 2 hours and $5, we cannot think beyond it. Same thing when you get stuck to that idea of gravity, you can't listen to your child in a very different idea that can come out from him. Remember the 10-year Julius Meyer? You never know which new law is going to get written, which no one knows today, because that's the constraint. You are stuck to the existing law. So that's, I think, interesting thing. There are more stories in the book with respect to constraint, but one thing I would definitely want to, say to all of you is, think about the pieces of knowledge which we hold very hard and fast. And when I'm saying knowledge, I would say what you believe in. I'm not saying knowledge as in knowledge, but what you believe in. Can you challenge them? Can you allow your child to challenge them? Can you allow it to be broken even in that 5-minute conversation, even if you don't have to change it, but even that 5-minute conversation? I think that's where the key is about a child's capability. The reason they are brilliant scientific thinkers is because they don't have those constraints. They can step into the shoes of anyone just like that because they don't have to live with any constraint. No one ever told them gravity, so they can think outside the box. So yeah, that's what, thinking is walking in the footsteps of child is all about. Sometimes you have to change your shoes. It's as simple as that.
So I'm going to talk about one more. I mean, there are so many, but we are time constrained here. And whether you realize it or not, we're almost coming up on the 1 hour mark. So I'm going to ask one more question. And then, if any of you have a question, please, turn on your hand raise button, and I will call you to ask the question so we can keep it a little bit more interactive. Sharad, as somebody who has gone through multiple techniques on problem solving, appreciative inquiry, Kepner-Traeger method, talk about problem solving, I really found your multiple steps of problem solving, which starts with, should I even attempt to solve the problem? Step 0, okay, to applying unrestricted thinking. The rule of 3, the test of credibility. Can you talk about problem solving through one of your most interesting stories so that everyone
Yes,
can
I
walk
will.
with? Yeah.
Good you asked me, because the step 0 is my favorite step, and it was not till at some point in time it became, I was once doing a session with children who are, slum children, not very, so luckily one of my friends said, would you do a session with them? I said, okay. So I went and I was telling them story. So there is this very popular Akbar, Birbal and crow story, which is Akbar asked Birbal to count how many crows are there in his kingdom, and which is the story I use in the book also. And Birbal gives a random number, and Akbar asks, how do you know that? I mean, what if there are more crows in my kingdom? And then Birbal gives a very witty answer saying, if there are more crows, then it just means that some crows from the neighboring kingdom are visiting the relatives in our kingdom. And then the moral is, with wit, you can solve a lot of problems. So that's how the entire book has co-opted stories like this, twisted them slightly to say, what will you do kind of scenario. So in that session, I actually asked children, imagine that, Akbar is a king, and let's understand he's not a stupid king. So I would assume that if someone gives me an answer like this and I am a king with, a hot-headed king, I would say around, do you think I'm stupid enough to give me a stupid answer? Go and count the number of crows, get the exact answer. Otherwise, the guillotine is waiting for you. Correct. So, I said, children, now you have to help Birbal. How do you count the number of crows? And, multiple answers came. But one answer that actually, I still remember, and that point in time, I was like, I didn't know how to respond to that answer. Literally, I was like caught unawares. One child actually said that I will kill all the crows in the kingdom and give 0 as the answer. And I was like, what do you mean? I mean, how can you kill all the crows just for giving an answer? And, I was like, somewhere fuming, how can you destroy nature? You cannot be selfish, all that kind of thinking. Is my child becoming a murderer? What is he trying to do? Kind of all kinds of thinking that come into mind. It's a very stupid answer if you think about it. For all of us, it's a very stupid answer. Anyone can tell you it's a stupid answer. And I was also saying, what is the stupid answer all about? But like I said, is slowly and slowly, we all change. And I had also by that time learned some of these lessons that wait for some time, there will be something more to it. So, I waited and then you ask some more questions here and there, here and there. But the sum and substance journey is by the end of it, I realized what the child was telling me is a very simple thing. A stupid question deserves a stupid answer. Just because you think you're a teacher and can stand up, ask any question, I am supposed to answer any question to you. I thought, there is a very famous quote of Steve Jobs where he says that it's only by saying no you can focus on the most important. So, for every yes that you say in life, say 100 no's. Conserve your energy. Energy cannot be created in this universe. Use it for the problems that you will actually solve. It's not about writing a post and cribbing about the government and doing this. Do you really want to solve this problem? The child, in a very funny way, I mean, the most interesting way I can think of, taught me, why should I solve a problem just because you think you're some fancy teacher? I don't want to solve it. I'm not interested, which makes sense to me. I mean, so that's why I said this is for me one of the most interesting stories for me, because it really made me think. And actually, till that point in time, my problem solving, when I used to talk about, I used to only talk about 3 steps. It's only the step 0 got added afterwards. And I said, I've been missing one of the big things in my life is I've been saying yes to probably too many things. And probably that's what has made me, stuck to this path without doing anything. I mean, I've heard this so many times. I've been told this, and I sometimes think in the hindsight whether I did this right or wrong, because a lot of people told me, why did you not do a part-time job to survive financially and do this also and do this? And I've been always saying is no, if I can't survive, I will try going back to job, which is probably where I'm standing today. But as long as I'm there, I want my head, heart, and hands to be completely for this, because I'm saying no to everything else in life except this one thing. And yes, it sounds the most risky, but I think that's the only way magic happens. And I don't know of any better way than this kind of thing. So
So,
yes.
Sharad, there was a question that Tanya had asked, okay, which is also one of my questions. What was your biggest challenge when you were writing this book? Tanya, did I get that right?
Yes, I guess you used the most comprehensive way to ask this question.
What were some of your challenges, Sharad?
Like I said, there are a couple of things. First is I'm not a writer, so weaving a narrative is very difficult for me. So my lucky part only was is that this piece, this problem solving, this book, as well as my entire science course has been an iterative journey always. I go to a class, I put a question, and then let a free for all that happens. Sometimes children are just silent, they don't respond. Sometimes they respond. But every class I come back and take notes and keep adding. So it has actually, so if you ask me the biggest challenge, had I thought of being a writer and written, I don't think I could have ever written it, because it took that 9 years for that narrative to shape up. I had no, so I will, today also, like as I'm writing this book, there are at least another nothing less than 30, 40 comments I still have with me, which I wanted to. And thankfully, my publisher was good enough to, at one point draw a line and say, if you keep writing like this, I can't publish a book anymore. Okay. So I said, okay, I'll put a pen down. Let's not get angry and, make it any troublesome for ourselves. So I stopped. So, the biggest challenge is, when you are with I was actually capturing children's thought. And the problem is, because they are so creative, they keep moving on and moving on and moving on, and you're struggling to catch up. So when I look at this book today, I'm mighty proud of it, but I know there is so many things I could not still say, because I didn't have time. I didn't have time to put that in the narrative. And the way the capitalist structure works is, I just don't know, if I put some more pages, the book will become redundant because it will become too expensive, kind of thing. So the most biggest challenge, I would say, Tanya, is that just being able to catch up with the creativity of your child and being able to expand your own thinking to incorporate that. For me, this is not a book. I mean, this is a book that I've learned to live with. And for me, it's a philosophy that I want to leave behind. I mean, in the introduction also, I've said this, I never thought of writing this book. This book literally got written because I could not figure out how to survive more now than this. So in those, depressing days, I said, okay, let me write a book. Something probably will happen, because even if I don't survive as a teacher, hopefully the thought will survive that children need more respect. We need an education system where the teacher has to understand a teacher is not a person who teaches, because these are meaningless words. A class is not one teacher and 10 children. A class is 11 teachers and 11 children. So if you walk into the class with your head bent down, knowing that you're going to engage with some of the smartest guy here, and that's your luck, just listen to them, go with their flow. The same teaching that you are trying to attain happens literally effortlessly. So that's what, I would say it's literally the biggest challenge is catching up with the intellect of the child. Half of my neurons probably are lost now in this 50 years of being on this planet. Just catching up with this bundle of intellect is my biggest challenge in writing this book.
So, Nisha, you had asked a question if this was only about science, and I wrote to you saying it was not. Let me elaborate on that, okay? Sharad's examples, stories, it very neatly brings out fundamentals of decision making, economics, demand and supply, price equation, fundamentals of arbitration and adjudication, environmental awareness. So, if you look and all this related through very interesting tales. Okay. We are coming up on the end of the hour, and I want to say two things. Please register, because one of the things we are going to do is do a random pick and have a signed copy of the book sent to 5 people. Okay. Even Sharad didn't know I was going to be announcing this, but we are going to do that. So kindly register or write to Sharad. And please, the book is available, and we are offering it for this particular session at a very special price. I mean, it's not an expensive book to begin with, but we are offering it at a very, very low price. And Sharad, it looks like everybody is from India, so you can give the price.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think we are going down to the wire now like this. But yeah, if you go to the site of the publisher, which is Twaga, it's available at a price of 450, which is the discounted price of the book. On Amazon, it is at 775. Thanks to the Amazon cost structures, but I don't want to criticize them. They at least provide us a platform to go ahead. So that's what it is there. If you go through that, if you face any problem, is not be able to, put an order there, please feel free to drop a message to me. On the backside, there is a mail ID. You can comment on the book. You can send your feedback, anything kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, the 5 signed copies, I'm not sure if people are cherishing my signature, but let me also tell you, I don't know how to sign. So I have never been able to do one signature forever in my life.
I'm sure you can come up with an innovative signature. I'm sure your son
every
and
5
daughter
people
would
will
help
get
you.
5 people will get 5 signatures, I can assure you. I in my bank account, I struggle. How many times my checks have been rejected, you don't know.
Okay, so we
So
do have
how
one
bad.
question from Chitwan. What motivated you to write the book? The one point when you thought this needs to be written and share it with the people. Did it happen over time? Yes, it happened over 9 years. But what was that pivotal point, Sharad, that you said, I must do it?
Like I said, I came to a point where I realized that I don't know how long I will last as a teacher. So I said, okay, I want everyone in this world to, there is one thing that I want to leave behind. I'm not so much in love with legacies and all those. I want to be gone and forgotten completely. But if there is one thing I want to leave behind is that we as adults learn to understand that children are the most intellectual, amazing scientists. They will not become Einsteins. They are right now. And I'm not saying this because I want to sell myself, my course, or my book. This is what I have learned from a most heartfelt way. Their thinking is pristine. I mean, if you want, I tell my friends, if you really want serious advice, on your own, family, relationships and thing, go to your child. And I'll just take 2 minutes here. I a couple of years back, I had again reached a point where I said, to hell with the world. Why should I do this here? I'm trying to teach people well, and everyone comes and crips to me that you are this, you are that, and you are not good. And it's frustrating sometimes. And sometimes you just throw in the towel and say, I don't want to listen to this script. So why should I do this? I'll just go back, better do my job and listen to crib of at least one boss and listen to someone whom I'm not even related. So, I just threw my towel and I was sitting on my sofa in the dejected way, and my son came and sat next to me. And, instinctively I turned around and asked him, Shiv, what do you think I should do? He said, what happened? I said, I want to teach well. I want people to understand how children are intelligent. I want them to understand education has a lot of joy into it, but no one wants to listen to me. People just want marks, grades, exams. I'm frustrated. I mean, I'm killing myself in the process in all possible ways, and I'm still not able to get my message across. He heard me. He said, okay, so what do you want to do? He said, I mean, what can I do? I mean, I can only quit. And then he looked at me, paused for a few seconds, and then said one line and then left. He said, but then this is the real test. And for a second, I didn't know how to react. And before I could react, he was already gone. But I realized what a simple way he told me, are you actually doing something for someone else? Do you think you can even own responsibility for the world? Your own life is a mess, and you think you can change the world and teach them to become better parents and all this? You are doing this because you love doing it. Just do it for yourself. This is not about anyone else. This is about you. So, take them seriously. They can give you some of the most wise advice, including scientific answers, if you're willing to listen. Take children more seriously. That's the only thought I want to leave behind, whether I am there or not there. Take children more seriously. Maybe put them next to the picture of your God and listen to them like a God.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Beautiful. Folks, does anyone want to unmute and say something? Ashay, I know you had you missed out the answer to the question, but is there anything you want to say as a concluding remark?
Yeah, I would like to share a small anecdote. When I visited my younger daughter in Ireland 3 months ago, my granddaughter, 3.5-year-old, she had a habit of, whenever I called somebody, she used to come and sit on my lap and say, whom are you talking to? 3.5-year-old. So I said, my friend. So convert it to video call. I want to see your friend. She would always insist on that. So I was talking to a friend of mine, Prakash Jog, who has a habit of pulling legs of people, always making fun. So he saw her sitting on my lap and he said, what is your name? So she says, my name is Rahi, Raahi. And then she had a toy in her hand, a dog. So he asked, what is it that is in your hand? She said, his name is Cookie. So what is he? He's a dog, she said. So Prakash said, oh, in Ireland, your dogs have 2 eyes. So she said, yes. So he says, no, in India, every dog has 4 eyes. So she said, show me. And that anecdote ended. And that show me was such a surprise even to me and to him, that he is a professor of physics. He suddenly was nonplussed. He didn't know. He never expected that a small child will say, show me. She just said, show me, so innocently. And when I was listening to Sharad, I remembered this incident, that a 3.5-year-old girl very innocently saying, if you're saying India, there are 4 dogs have 4 eyes, show me. As simple
That's
as
your
that.
rule.
No other argument.
That's your rule number 3 in action. Multiple credible evidences. You don't need to teach them. They know how to check the authenticity of what you do.
Yeah, so it's very well said, Sharad, that if we care to listen, children have something which is some wisdom, and we are always proud of our intelligence, but I think wisdom always scores over intelligence, and that is the lesson I have learned from hearing children say. Yeah, I hope I have been able to add some value.
Absolutely, like always. So I'm so proud that Sharad was part of my team. Anand Ashe was part of my team. Jyoti, you had a comment? Jyoti Ashtankar? Okay, I think there's a problem with what she's saying is it was a wonderful discussion, Sharad and Sushma. There are many takeaways from this discussion. Like this session, especially the line said by Sharad, something like, parents are gardeners who should let the flower bloom. Totally agree with this thought. Thank you.
Yes.
With that wonderful thought, I draw this discussion to a conclusion. Thank you all very much for joining us and making it a very interesting session.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.